dedicated to helping women who are in situations of struggle. Um, you can find me at my website, which is juliebarthauthor.com. And all of the links for my charity, my books, my podcasts are all found in the same place.
Perfect. So you mentioned that you run a charity. So why did you start the charity and what are some of the details about it?
I started the charity because I married my grammar school sweetheart right out of college. We had four children, one who's special needs, um, and I lost him to pancreatic cancer. It was very sudden. He lived for 16 months, but there were some pretty hard months. And at that time, I made a promise to him that I would make sure that all of his suffering was not in vain. After he passed, I kind of put that behind me and thought, well, I'm just going to move on, and, kind of didn't honor what I said I would, and got together in a second marriage that was very abusive. And coming out of that situation, I was reminded that I had made the initial promise. And the charity is dedicated not to, being a widow, not to being the survivor of a domestic violence, abuse, emotional abuse. It's really to help women who, you find yourself in this position where you're in crisis and nobody really wants to help you until you have nothing. So it's very it's a hard place to be because you're trying to take care of your children, fight all these the external factors, and at the same time fight so many systematic ways that it's hard to get ahead in the world as a woman. So, I always say it's not that I don't recognize that men have their own challenges. I my hope is to help my experience, which is as a woman, and help many women that find themselves in a position to rebuild, because I've had to rebuild so many times. And if I can make the road lighter for someone else, then all of the things that I've been through make sense to me. So
When you're looking back at your own experiences and then you mentioned the charity and you want to help women, what were some of the obstacles that you faced or that the women that you assist face when it comes to handling abuse in its various forms in their relationships or even in their lives?
I think there's so much shame that goes on when you're in a domestic violence situation. I think that there's this perception that women should know better. You were somehow stupid, or you should have seen it coming. And I think it keeps you stuck in the same situation you're at. I encounter a lot of women who, as caregivers, as mothers, we decide to take a back seat in a relationship. That's, traditional roles. You might have a job, but you're probably not the breadwinner. And all of a sudden you find yourself alone without any resources, having to step in, having to be that number one source. And then you fight things like going back into the workforce, trying to find a lucrative job, not minimum wage, because that's not going to work. And everyone says, like, oh, where's your work history? And, I was a mom for 10 years, and gosh, I was, counselor, cook, project manager, fundraiser at the school. But, to the outside world, it's almost as if, oh, so you haven't been doing anything in 10 years. So you have to start at the bottom rung. And starting at the bottom doesn't make enough money for you to do what you need to do. And then you add in the shame of having to tell people what went on behind closed doors. I always say, if you expose an abuser, you necessarily have to expose your own behavior and how you feel like you were suckered into it, or should have known better, or should have been smarter, or why didn't you leave, or all these questions that people on the outside, it seems so obvious to everybody else, but when you're in it, it doesn't appear as obvious. And then you're almost, you finally get out from underneath an abuser, and you're abused by the legal system, you're abused by the workplace, and you're really left with very few resources at a time when you should be with your kids. You're pulled away from them, and there's so many complex thoughts that go on behind the scenes, that our charity was really founded to kind of be a concierge service. You can come to us from all different walks of life, whether that means that you suddenly became a widow, and, the position I was in, or it means that you were, in a domestic abuse, or you were just in a regular divorce situation. There's all kinds of things that come with all of those situations that we're hoping to help women at least navigate to know what their next step is.
I think a lot of people ignore the fact that there's the shame maybe that you would have within yourself that your relationship is ending, and it's ending in a way that in some cases can be very public because eventually you have to go in front of the jury of your social circle and say that I'm not married anymore. I'm not with this person who you guys have got to know as my co-pilot in this thing. And another thing that I find that people struggle with is the day that they finally leave, they thought about leaving maybe 100 or 1,000 times before. It's just they couldn't get through the door, or maybe they had second thoughts because there's the guilt. Oh my, maybe if I love him a little bit more, maybe if I treat her better, they will stop this type of abuse. Do you see those types of thoughts keeping people stuck, either yourself or maybe the woman that you work with in the relationship because they don't want to deal with how society or maybe even their social circles are going to view them?
Yeah, it's a very complex thing, as I said, you do, in both of my marriages, I wasn't just Julie anymore. I married very young, and coming out of that scenario, it's like you don't even know who you are. Again, you have to say I failed, whether it was an abuse situation or not. I think as women, we're taught really to keep things together, to do your best to try and keep families intact. And in what better way than to, like you said, love more, do better. So I think stepping out of that, yeah, I always say that the hardest part, I think, was that everyone was available during the week. Like, let's go grab a drink on Wednesday. But all of the invites for the weekends seemed to be reserved for couples. And so I wasn't invited anymore because that was like, oh, we're going out as couples. And although I wasn't a couple anymore, it did. It almost was like, oh, you're not with us anymore. Sorry, but I'll see you on Monday and Tuesday. If you want to go grab a drink, and that makes you rethink who you are. And as a mom, you define yourself by, you know in relation to who you're with, and all of a sudden, yeah, it's just me, and what kind of worth do I have? Who am I? Because you do give up so much of your life. I think even as a partnership of any type, you have to give up certain characteristics of yourself, and the longer that you're with someone, the more you let go of really a lot of pieces of yourself. So reclaiming those, figuring out who you are outside of that, um, and you have to do it in front of everyone. So, and it's a hard thing to navigate, I think.
Do you find some people struggle to rebuild or find an identity?
Well, the average statistic says that anyone in an abuse situation takes about 7 times to leave before the average person. Yeah, and I think once you're outside of that, I think it's like anything else. If you're a CEO and all of a sudden you get fired, well, what am I going to do on Friday? Or, I don't have to go into work on Monday. You do. You have to sit with yourself, and you don't have. I will say that one of the saddest moments of all of my experiences, which are varied and vast, was when I went in after my first husband died to a doctor's appointment. Totally no big deal. But they had me update my paperwork, and it said emergency contact. And in that moment, I thought, I don't have an emergency contact. I've lost my emergency contact. And that's a very jarring feeling, that one person that is supposed to care for you, that is supposed to take care of you, that you're supposed to call, no longer can you call them. And even worse, if they're still alive and you realize that someone else might be calling them for that same position. So, yeah, it's very, very complex. And I think it's like anything else in life. Before I got divorced, when I lost my first husband, I had friends that were getting divorced, and I did not have the empathy that I should have for them. I thought, oh, well, sometimes things just don't work out, and that's really sad. But I never really fully understood how much how much that alters your life and how it changes you and who you are.
I had a friend pass away a couple of years ago, and within the same year, a relationship that I was in ended as well. What I realized was I lost two identities. I lost the one that I had with this friend who was close to me, as well as I wasn't someone's partner anymore. So what I started to do is I shifted my perspective for one that was outside versus one that was inside. I was like, this is my moment to shine. This is my moment to become a new terrain, an improved terrain. But one of the challenges I found was that some people struggled to accept the new terrain. Some people began to say, I liked you when you were suffering a lot more than when you're successful. And I was like, wow, is this, were they always like that? Or did the veil fall off? The curtains was pulled open and the mask was lifted off. And I was like, oh, they have a little bit of demon inside of them when it comes to my growth, right? Is that an obstacle for some people to handle where they realize that those around them maybe don't have their best interest, but now they have to make a decision, but the decision that they're making for their own personal growth is lonely, it's alone, and maybe they're not prepared for that road alone.
I think that everything that you're describing has nothing to do with you. I would guess that all of those people that were not in your corner and rooting for you, my sense is that they wished that they probably had taken the step that you did. They're very unhappy in their own lives. They're looking around and thinking, "Oh, he did it. He did what I've been thinking of doing, but I don't have the courage." And instead of saying, "Well, maybe he should inspire me," it's much easier for them to say, "Oh, well, he's not as happy as he thinks he is. Oh, just wait, because when that shoe drops, he'll find out how lonely it is." Um, and again, I think that's one of the hardest things as human beings to accept or maybe to see is that usually if people have a problem with you, they don't have a problem with you. They have a problem with themselves that they're projecting onto you. So yes, I think that is a real thing. When I just had this conversation with others the other day, is people don't like to feel vulnerable. They want to feel comfortable in their own situation, in their own skin. When I was, when Colin, my first husband, was dying, he was sick for 16 months, literally just, he had pancreatic cancer. It was very devastating. And people couldn't admire me enough and say, "Oh my gosh, she's the best caregiver. She's the best mom. She's the ditto." Oh, when he passed away, the tide turned very quickly. And it was all of a sudden, she's going out too much. Oh, look at her. She's doing this, or she's moving on and she shouldn't move on, or whatever it was. And it took me many years to understand that it wasn't about me, that it was when bad things happen to good people. I think sometimes people have to find fault in you, because if they don't think that you deserved what you got or that you are moving on and doing better, then they have to acknowledge that they're vulnerable for things to happen to them too. So, yeah, all those things exist. And honestly, it has nothing to do with you as a person moving on, feeling better, feeling secure about yourself, but it does affect you. Um, my advice to anybody going through that is, people are going to have whatever opinion of you that they do. And as someone said to me a while ago, like, what people think of you is none of your business. And I will agree with that. And it's a very hard thing to recognize. But those people that aren't in your corner, that aren't supportive of you, I think they can keep you stuck in a bad situation because you're afraid of losing them. But when I got on the other side of it, what my vision now is, if your relationships with people are so fragile that you are going to lose them, then you don't have them to begin with. And that's a hard thing to accept as a human being too. But nothing should be that fragile. And if they don't give you the space, if they don't support you, if they're not cheering for you to win, they were never your friend to begin with.
If you can't find happiness as you defined it, and they leave you because the happiness that you have is not the happiness that they think is happiness, then you're right. They weren't ever your friend. I was at a grief retreat, and one person shared that when their spouse was dying, and there were certain things on an intimate level that they couldn't do anymore. They couldn't hold each other. They couldn't do these things. And he wanted to experience that. So after she passed, he did end up in a relationship where he was spending time with someone, but it wasn't intimate at that point. And he shares that he was judged. People called him all kinds of names. And when he was sharing this, I just asked him, I was like, "Do you believe that you are what people are saying you are?" And he was like, "I don't know." And I told him, "Well, that's the problem, right? Because now you're not living your life for yourself, or maybe not even in honor of the person that you loved. You're living your life for these other people, and you never did this when the person was alive." So he
Yeah.
began to isolate, and then he began to fall into depression, and he was suffering all these things. And he found a support group, and the support group was very helpful. And I remember him sharing, he's like, "Terrain, it's called Widow's Fire." I'm like, "Widow's Fire?" I'm like, "What's that?" "It's when you want to be intimate, but your partner has passed away." I was like, "There's terms for everything, Julie." I was like, "Oh my God."
There are, yes.
Right? I'm like, "Let me
Yeah.
write this down. Widow's Fire."
Just so
Right?
you have
But
it in in your handbook, just in
in
case.
my handbook, right? Add it to the list for 2026. But what I loved is that he found this new confidence because of the support group. You're running a charity. How important is it to find your tribe during those times?
I would say it makes all the difference in the world. Um, you know, e Everything is so much easier, I think, when you don't feel like you're doing it alone. And I think in a lot of these abusive relationships, what you don't realize is that not only are you doing it alone, but you have somebody who's sabotaging you through it. But you do have an illusion that someone is at your side, and, I find my charity is very, or our charity, it's in its early stages. We just started in September, and I've changed the paradigm many, many times and tried to figure out the best way to use resources and the best use of money, because there are other I don't wanna duplicate anything, so I don't really have, at this point, a large amount of monetary resources, but I will tell you that the best gift that I have found in our charity is, I have people that they don't need help. They need somebody to remind them who they are. And I walk through them with stuff. I really don't provide much, but like call me 10 a.m., call me. I will be that lifeline. I will be your emergency contact through this. And it's amazing to me that at the end they will come to me and they will say, like, "Oh, I couldn't have done it without you." And my answer to them is always, you could have. You 100% always could have, but I was your mirror to show you who you are, because you forget what you're capable of, who you are, what you can do. And you're so scared to move forward. You had this dream and somebody took it, and you have two choices. You can, choose to sit in whatever you're sitting in and hoping that things will get better, or you can take action. But taking action is a scary thing, because you don't want to let go of your dream, because it could still come true, especially in something like an emotionally abusive relationship, because that's what they do. They hold it in front of you, and the minute you get out of line, they pull it. And when they pull it, you're like, "Oh, I have to behave, otherwise I'm going to lose what I had." And that's how they keep you in line until you finally can't get back there, because you have to keep doing more and more and more to get back in their good graces and lose a little bit more of yourself. So the people that come to me, they're shells of who they used to be. They don't know it's true. They don't know what's up anymore. They don't know it's right. It's such a confusion. They have your mind spinning in circles of telling you you're something you're not. And although you know it somewhere deep down, you have no other choice to believe what they're telling you, because you feel like that's the road to redemption.
It's the difference between someone doing something out of care and something doing something out of control. And I speak to some of these women, and their view of reality has been so damaged from these situations that not only do they look at themselves in an unhealthy way, like when they look at the world, it's so based on conditions. I will do this so Julie validates me. I will do this so Turing gives me attention. And then you ask them, what is love? What does it feel like? I'm like, oh, well, when I do this, this, right? They're
Yeah.
listing everything that they have to do. And I'm glad that you're there to assist them because we all need motivation. We all need that helping hand to sometimes when we fall down to lift ourselves up. For you these days, who provides that helping hand for you?
The same people that I'm providing for them. It is true that when you go through trauma, speaking your trauma, helping other people, healing, helping to heal them helps to heal you because I see myself in them. And I think, gosh, I've come so far. I will never do that again. I will never be that person. And remember how terrible it is. But it reminds me again of, yeah, that's right. I was there and I'll never be there again. And it is. I think one of the greatest things that people can do, and unfortunately, I don't think people realize it enough, is when you go through something really, really hard, I think that your natural tendency is to say, "Oh, God, I'm glad I'm glad I'm not there anymore." Put it away, not acknowledge it, think, "Whew, so glad that's in my past." But there's something so fulfilling to take that experience and help somebody else through it because then it makes it so much less meaningless. Like, yes, it was terrible that I lost Colin. It was terrible that I was in this. But, seeing somebody else and me being able to help them through something when I wished that I had somebody there, that's what it's all about. I've had people ask me, well, you talk to people, because I do. I have a tribe of people, and I talk to them when they call me at 2 a.m. or and they say, well, what happens when you get burnt out? And my answer to them is, I hope that I've built an army of people in my succession who, when I can't do it anymore, will carry on for me. And I have seen that. I have very young girls when in their 20s who have been through some really, really rough things with guys, and they're in these Facebook groups helping other women just by being there. And I think that's what it's all about is you know what better meaning is there in life than to help somebody else not go through what you went through. If you had to go through it, share your knowledge, be vocal. And it's tough. I go out there and I say things about my marriage and who he was, and of course I'm afraid. I'm always afraid. There's this when you go through something like that, they have this ability to demolish you in ways that I don't think anyone can understand, and that follows you forever. But what I find is that the power in telling the truth is so much more empowering than whatever can come from me. He can come from me, he can say what he wants, but for the first time, I know what the truth is. You can't alter what I know to be true anymore because that's what they do. They alter your reality, they alter your truth. And when you finally are grounded and you see who you are and what you're capable of and the good that you're capable of, then the fear goes away because you do whatever you want. I'm going to say what I want to say and help who I want to help. And that's why I had to go through what I went through. So
What was something that you learned about yourself that you're either proud of or maybe even caught you a little bit off guard and you were surprised of?
I think that I've always been a pleaser. Everybody talks about pleasers, and they say it in such a negative connotation. And I think growing up, I was the youngest in a family of four, and my parents didn't get along. So I was always trying to like please everyone, be nice, be nice, be nice. And I always think that I always looked at that like it was a weakness. And I used to think, oh, that's why I got into the relationship I did. Oh, that's why. And I always thought it was that missing piece of me not being strong enough or not caring about myself enough. And what I've learned is I think that's like the greatest thing that I have is that I am a pleaser and I'm fine with being a pleaser. I think that what I've learned to do is to take that energy and focus it on the people who really deserve it. But my whole attitude about wanting to please people, wanting to, care for others. I'm a caregiver by nature. I'm a mother of six. And I see that as a positive. And I think our culture doesn't do enough of seeing pleasers as people who are healers, and they're, sure, you can give too much of yourself or not, but I don't think it's a weakness. So in myself, I think that that was very, for me to turn that into kind of a powerful thing, was it was surprising to me, and it's something that I still embrace all the time, that I am a pleaser and I'm just fine with it.
It was your way of finding out your own superpower and taking something that maybe can be viewed as a negative, or maybe even something that can be taken advantage of. Because the abusers, they would love to get someone that's a people pleaser, right? Because they know that you're going to give your all in that relationship. But the most important thing is, and sounds like you did this, was you created boundaries
Well,
around
I'm
this,
still.
right?
I mean, I
It's a
think that I'm a work in progress. I think everyone is, but yeah, yes, I think trying to not take everybody for face value, because I tend to see the good in people, downplay the bad, which I love that about myself. I'll never change that part about myself. Trying to be a little less naive, that it is a work in progress. Yeah.
I think we all are. It's like that painting, right? That of the sculpture. We're just one day it's going to be a beautiful, perfect image on that canvas. For the women out there, a lot of women are nurturers, caregivers by nature, as you mentioned, right? Especially if they have children. And I will agree with you that I think sometimes it doesn't get appreciated enough, or maybe doesn't even get represented in the most positive of light. Some of the women we work with, do you see their nature or who they are as caregivers being taken advantage of in these situations that they're leaving?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, and, it's always shocking to me, the women that come to me, they're beautiful, they're established, they're smart, they are caring, and if you ask them about themselves, their perspective of who they are is so backward, and it I think it is, people who are do tend to abuse people, they are looking for that person who just wants to give of themselves, who wants to believe that everybody's good, and, birds fly every day, and I will say that, I hope for those people out there that started out that way, I hope that they don't harden. That's always been one of my thing, I still have people, "Oh my gosh, well, how do you still let people into your life? How do you not? How would you date someone? How would you?" And to me, it's like, my abuser took so much from me, so much joy for so many years, that I refuse to let him take that essence of me that does believe in rainbows and fairy tales and good things, and that's the way that I wanna approach the world forever. Am I gonna be taken advantage of again? Probably. Hopefully, I'll learn the signs and get out of it quicker, rather than, but if I chose to hide that side of myself, or be very cautious or be closed off, then that's just one more, that's the most important part of me that he would have taken, and I refuse to let that part of me go. I'm gonna approach the world as people are good until hopefully the day that I'm no longer here, because I don't wanna live in a world that he constructed for me. I wanna live in the world that I was born in.
Do you think some of the people who end up in these relationships, let me rephrase that question. Someone who I interviewed not too long ago, and we speak every once in a while, she was a victim of emotional and financial abuse. And this was across multiple partners. And she was grieving each time because she felt like she lost a part of herself because she was so beaten down. When she spoke to a coach and when she did the work and when she spoke to a therapist and she continued to do work, she began to realize the role that she played in this. And the role was she needed someone to just tell her that they loved her because she didn't hear it growing up. Do you see some women who are stuck in these situations, and maybe one of the reasons could be that they wanted something so bad, maybe from their childhood, maybe from their parents or wherever, that they're getting it, even though it's unhealthy, but that's why they maybe get caught up in the situations they get caught up in.
I think that we all have that inner child, Maybe some of it is relationships. Other, I see people that are so hell bent on having authority, no offense, some people that become police officers is because they had no control over their lives. So, yeah, I think that we're all just little versions of ourselves looking to heal pieces of who we are. Um, again, I think that I did read something interesting, and this kind of relates to what you talked about because there is this impression that women who do get themselves into those situations somehow it's their fault because they're choosing men um, for whatever reason. The flip side of the coin is that it has been proven that people, the abusers, look for people like them. So, it's the other side of the coin where nobody comes into your life and says, when I married my second husband, he didn't come to me and say, I'm going to be horrible to your kids. I'm not going to like them at all. In fact, I'm going to paint you into a little perfect, box. I'm going to take all your money. I'm going to take it. They don't say that. They are very manipulative. They're very good at presenting the best side of themselves. So, can women blame themselves for not seeing it? Perhaps, but I would also say that these people are very good at what they do. And by the time that you even recognize that something is not what you think it is, you're so intertwined, you're financially, you're and can it happen more than once? Probably, because again, you want to see the good and they want to feed you the good. And if they know you've already been through it, then they're going to keep all of those things really deep hidden until they've got you. And they also know that you have a track record of being walked on. So if they can get you to a position that, where they know they've got you is when they're really going to come out. So I think that that perception kind of gets me hung up because I don't know that women would ever who is going to look at a situation and say, oh, this guy's going to he's going to make my life miserable for a decade, sign me up, rather than this guy over here who would be fine, but I want this one. um, they are very good at finding out what you're looking for and giving you a line that that is who they are, and I think that that is the mindset that comes along with this. So yeah, I would say that we're all trying to somehow heal our inner child. But I do think people that are like this, narcissists, sociopaths, they're very good at what they do as well. So they keep it hidden long enough for you to fall in love with them. And then you're in love with this version that they're not. And you have a hard time reconciling who they really are.
No one shows up. Hey, I'm here to abuse you, Julie. You want to get
Yeah.
married? It's like,
Right. I'm going to take everything you have. I'm going to bottom you out. I'm going to lie to you. Yeah. I mean, who would sign up for that? No one that I know.
no one, no
No
one. Not
matter
even
how no
those.
matter how damaged you are, you still would not be like, "That sounds fantastic."
Yeah, not even those who have a kink for it, right?
Right?
they'll be like, no, I'm good over here. Let me go find someone that's actually gonna love me.
Yeah,
There's this joke that like abusers and victims graduate every year, like school, every June,
yeah,
because there's always someone to do something, and I think that's the part that gets missed is a lot of these people who are causing the harm, they're hurting themselves in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Right. And that's why they're doing these things because maybe they were powerless in a situation or their inner child, as you mentioned, and this is their way to gain power by controlling someone else. When you speak to the women now, in general, what tips can you give them to prepare themselves for an exit out of these types of relationships or situations to make sure that they're safe and, of course, are going to be secure?
gosh, I don't even know where to start with that. I think that one of the most important things as that I do talk to women about is like it's not selfish to protect yourself. You know, I think women have a very hard time putting themselves first. Having your own checking account seems very selfish, or that you don't trust your partner, like, oh, I'm walking into this thinking it's going to end. I think you should walk into every situation thinking it's going to end. And I say that because in my first marriage, I had the best human being I could ever, ever, ever wish for. But he came down with pancreatic cancer and died. And I was not prepared for that. And I think that you hope for the best, you want to see the best, but always plan for the worst so that you're prepared. I think that's a very hard thing for women to do. Again, probably every human. I'm only speaking because you asked me about women. I think it's very important not to give up who you are as a person in order to, be everything to anybody else, because I think we do give up a lot. When I think of, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's degree, but I gave up all of that because it was important to me, for me to stay home with my children. Now, should I have been paying myself a salary? Yes. But did I want to? No, because it felt like it was cutting into my resources. But I think that as an equal, if you're at home and you are, even a part-time job, or you're carrying the load, then you're both working independently and you should take care of yourself. I think that's very important. And it's something that, I always say, when someone goes into professional sports, we all say, well, you have a backup plan, right? Like, and nobody thinks twice about that. But if you say that to like a stay-at-home mom, well, I hope you have nobody ever says that to a stay-at-home mom, but it's the same situation. Like, what happens if you become breadwinner? What happens if you lose your husband? What happens if you get divorced? Like, we don't want to think about those things. We don't want to discuss it. We don't want to. And I think it's an important conversation to have in our society, because it is very skewed and systematic, and you don't know until you're on the other side of it. And then that's why our charity was born, because you're sitting there and you think, I have nothing, but you have savings. So, oh, well, we're not going to help you. Okay. And then you get to a point where you're in poverty and they're like, oh, now we'll help. Well, why shouldn't we help them where they're at, so that they can soar, instead of waiting till they slip into poverty and be like, we're here to help now. So that's really what our charity was founded on, to provide that canopy. Why are we letting people lose everything they have before we'll step in and help?
Everyone should have a backup plan and separate accounts. I'm telling everyone now, this is what I do. It is not selfish. If the person is going to look at you funny, hell, if you're going to look at yourself funny, it's just, you know what I call it, Julie? It's, would you drive a car without insurance?
Yeah.
That's probably one of the best examples that I've heard so far, and I share that. That's all. This doesn't mean that you love the person any less. It's just you're protecting yourself just in case. Of course, you go to work towards the best and hope for the best, right? But unfortunately, death is a reality, divorce is a reality, outgrowing each other is a reality, right? So we always have to be prepared. Um, Can there be a sense of maybe shame in that preparedness, as you mentioned, where it's, I don't want to do this because maybe I don't love the person if I do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a part of you that thinks like, well, if I'm not all in, then why am I married? I did have that when I first got married to my husband. I'm all in. I'm all in. We're going down together. We're doing this together. This is us. This is, and it was, and he would never begrudge me a single. And that was a separate circumstance. It didn't work out the way I wanted, and I had to fight my way out of it. The second one took advantage of the point that we're equals. What was mine was his, and his was his. And for me to say like, oh well, I'm going to have a separate account, would be met with, well, why would you need a separate account? Well, you don't trust me? And I will say to anybody out there, if you have somebody in your life who's questioning why you need to protect yourself, you should question why they would want you not to protect yourself.
Such wise words. You're absolutely right. And let me ask you one final question, Julie, before I let you go. I want to give you three wishes. And with this question, you can wish for three things that you want people to know. What are three wishes? What are three things you wish people knew about your view of the world? Meaning that if you can wish for a perfect world, how would that look like from a relationship standpoint and why?
Gosh, I think the first wish is that people cared so much less about what somebody thought of them. I think we covered that already. Nobody else has to walk in your shoes. Um, I think the second wish was that people didn't judge other people, and it is a real thing. If we could all just take care of ourselves and worry about what's going on in our own world. And third, I wish that people were more honest about their feelings about what's going on